have really come to the conclusion that he couldn't have done anything different.
Yeah.
And that in that sense, it wasn't an active choice. So you wouldn't condemn somebody for going into a diabetic coma, although you may say they could have followed their regime better. It wouldn't in the same way be as critical or as harsh with that person as with somebody who's taken their own life.
Welcome to The Narratives of Suicide, the podcast where we bring hope, community and a voice to those who've lost to suicide. It's where we dispel the myths of suicide. We dispel historical discourses and constructs that have been steeped in history for a very long time, and we're here with hope, love and support for everyone out there who needs to listen to this podcast. I'm so sorry you're here, but I do hope it can give you something to use in your healing process, to be able to pick up the pieces of suicide and put them back together again in the best possible way that you can. Hi everybody, welcome to Healing Narratives of Suicide. Today we have a big warm welcome for Andrea from Preston in the UK. Andrea, thank you so much for being here. Andrea lost a very close friend, almost like a brother, 8 years ago. So big sorry for that, first of all. And it's really great to have you here to talk about your journey since and what you've been through. Because I think it's been quite a whirlwind, hasn't it?
Yeah, it certainly has. And I'm grateful to you and the podcast because it's helped me so much. So I'm glad to share my story and I hope it might help somebody else.
Great. It's good to hear that. It's really good to hear that just sharing our stories like this, you know, simple as that, it can make a difference even 8 years on.
Yeah.
Because I only started it 8 months ago, something like that. So you've obviously only just listening to it recently and it's helping you now.
That's right, yeah.
Great. So maybe take us back 8 years. Shall we go back that far?
Yeah, I think we probably need to.
Good place to start.
Yeah. So Chris was a really close friend, and it kind of almost seems not the right word, friend. He was like a brother, really. I've known him for years and years, become part of our family, really. Chris had bipolar disease, and, you know, we'd see him through different cycles of being high or being low, but he was just Chris, and we loved him. And things had started to go wrong for him in his personal life, and his relationship had come to an end, and he was distraught about that, and that seemed to trigger a really low. And he made an attempt to end his life and was admitted to the local hospital. And I went to see him, and he was just kind of broken and in a real state and couldn't live where he was living. So he moved in with my parents, and it kind of became even closer to our family then, because, you know, he lived with my mum and dad. My twin boys at the time were 4. No, they were older than that. They were 6. Difficult to remember. So to them, he was just their crazy fun uncle. They really only saw him when he was well or high, which might have driven me slightly mad, but he was the best playmate. He would cover their playroom with train tracks and toys and things. So he was really close to us. But he seemed just to be really struggling to get well. And he made another attempt on his life and ended up back in hospital, and we continued to support him, continued to visit. Even, you know, we were allowed to go into the family room and the boys would come and play with him, and he loved them and they loved him, and it was kind of a way to help him. But I remember sitting with him and saying, Chris, you just can't do this again. You know how much the boys love you, you're valued. Please, please, please don't. And I was already in a bit of a tension because I knew the relationship my children had with him, and I knew the risk, really, but it was a risk that as a friend and a mum I just took and had to take when he seemed to be getting better. And I think this is a thing that I replay over in my mind. It's really clear memory because we'd gone all round to my parents for tea, and it was the night before Comic Relief. And so my boys were excited. They were getting ready. They were going to have a stay over at my mum and dad's that night, and were going into school all dressed up. And I was a bit stressed. Work had been really awful. I had a thumping headache. And Chris had said to me, we were stood around the table. He said, "Oh, I'm really good at a shoulder rub," and gave me a shoulder rub. And I just thought, oh, he's brighter, he's more himself, he's getting better. And then the next day, my parents, who hadn't had a break in 6 months, were going away for the weekend. And so the plan was that Uncle Chris would come and stay at ours for the weekend. We just didn't really want to leave him on his own. But he didn't arrive at our house. And I went to find him. I just had a gut feeling something was wrong. My husband was, oh, he's just late. He's got carried away doing something. And I went to my parents' house and I was too late. He was already gone. And yeah, I think it's not describable or understandable or anything really. That kind of whole experience of just, it knocked me out. I physically stopped functioning. I fell over, couldn't stand. Yeah, it was just too much. But only for a really short period of time, because almost once I'd managed to breathe, I was like, okay, you're a health professional, you've got this, you've been a good friend, you've done your best. Now look after everybody else.
Wow.
Make the phone calls, sort it all out. So that's what I did. I think somehow separated out me, who'd been through the worst, and pushed that aside to be, right, okay, I'm me that is competent and caring and helpful, and let's just be that.
Yeah.
That was quite a long explanation.
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking of a few things to pull out. When you say he was gone, you don't mean gone as in disappeared, run away, do you? You mean gone as in he was dead by the time you got there. So
yeah,
you had all of it, that impact of being the one to find him as well.
Yeah.
I just want to pull that out. And obviously your concern leading up to it, looking after him, being your caring self, was already there, wasn't it? Your caring self was already trying to help him. Your mum and dad were, you were staying with your mum and dad, it's part of the family. But it's really interesting then how you adopted that position even more so when you, I was going to say got over the shock, but you probably didn't. You just literally physically probably picked yourself back up. That's probably all you could do and carry on in the way you knew how.
Yeah. I suppose what I did was get practical. So yeah, it's like, okay, we've got the ambulance here, the police here, people need teas and coffee. There was all of that. And then there was, I have somehow got to tell my boys. So, and I think looking after my boys became the priority. So yeah.
Definite mum mode came out.
Yeah.
And I guess you had to tell your mum and dad because they weren't there as well.
Yeah. So it was a really strange situation because Chris hadn't arrived, our plans had changed. So I was due to be going out that evening to a meeting, and I was actually meeting somebody at my mum and dad's house. And Chris was going to spend the evening with my husband and the boys. So the person I was meeting was actually at the house when I said, I'm a bit worried about Chris, I'm going to go find him. So he was there, thankfully, and he rang my mum and dad, and they were just a couple of hours away, I think. They came back.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Health professional as well. What kind of health professional were you? Yeah,
a children's physiotherapist.
Okay. So very caring. Been a physiotherapist for a long time?
Yeah, I mean, that was all I'd ever done, really. So straight from school into training, and loved being a physio, but more and more with the kind of physio work I was doing, realising that life's bigger than how your body moves. And, I could often see the children and families I cared for really needed emotional support and care, as much as physical care. So, yeah, I was kind of moving in that direction in my thinking and approach.
Okay, yeah, for sure. I think it just teaches us, doesn't it, quite quickly when we lose someone because of mental health, basically. When it's suicide, you quickly recognise, don't you, how important mental health is and how integrated we are.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, let's go back anyway. Let's get on to that, what you're doing now, because I know things have changed for you over those 8 years in terms of your physiotherapy and what you're planning to do. But let's just go back to, because I think it's a really important thing to address, the whole, how do you tell the children?
Yeah.
Many people ask that question, what do we do? How do we tell them? How did you get through that? What did you do? What did you think best to do?
Oh, I agonised over it, and then me and my husband kind of taught, I don't know, I don't think I slept that night anyway, but just talked and talked because they were already in bed by the time I got home.
Right.
I think I've told you the wrong time scale, I'm trying to think, because they were only 7. So yeah, it's 9 years ago, not 8, but they were 7. And I just didn't think they would be able to comprehend suicide. So we decided that we would tell them almost indirectly, but not answer any question they asked. So if they brought us to a point of needing to tell them, we would.
Right.
But if they didn't, the boys were obviously very aware that Chris had been unwell because he'd been in hospital and they'd visited him. So I decided to say, when Mummy went to find Uncle Chris, it was really sad, but that he'd stopped breathing and that I called an ambulance, but nothing could be done to help him, and that Uncle Chris has died. And I can't remember exactly what they asked, but it was quite vague, and they seemed to understand when I just said, well, Uncle Chris was poorly and he had problems with his thinking and his mind, and those problems just got too big. And yeah, I suppose in some ways children, they just sobbed, both of them. And I think what's really, it's difficult and poignant is that they went through their last period of time with Chris and said, but he was happy. He waved us to school. He told us we looked good with our noses and our, I think they'd gone in their pajamas. And Isaac said, it was Red Nose Day. It was supposed to be a happy day.
Oh. Just for clarification, anybody in the US, I don't know if the US celebrate Red Nose Day. I've got no idea. But if anybody doesn't know, Comic Relief, Red Nose Day is we all wear red noses, like a clown, I guess. And all, it's a fun day where we celebrate and give money towards, to charities, but with the humorous side. So kids go to school in pajamas and people do silly things. Hence Comic Relief. People do silly things to raise money. Just wanted to clarify that. So when they went to school in red noses and in pajamas, that's why.
Yeah. But I think that has become a marker and we can't not know that day.
Of course.
So I think Comic Relief Day happens every 2 years, but it was a sinking feeling for me leading up to it, because I know it just really opens things up. Both the boys were distraught, but it particularly, I don't know how to describe it. It didn't impact Isaac more, but just in a different way, just because of his own makeup, I guess.
Right. So mum mode, telling the boys, did the best you could with telling them. Sounds like you did it really carefully, thoughtfully, and did what you felt as your mum and dad, best thing to do for them, which I think anyone, especially in the place you're in at the time, there's only so much you can do. So to just think about it first, to do the best for them. You know your children better than anybody. You knew them better than anybody, and you decided that was the best way. And sounds like you did it with real care. But if they wanted to ask more, then you would have maybe gone further if they wanted you to. Did you ever go further later? Did they ever ask you more later?
Yes. Yeah. So in as much as you can, I guess, not mine, but the boys' grief seemed to follow what you would expect. Not that you know what you would expect, but until it was about 2 years later, and Isaac, I think, had just been processing and thinking things over and sort of said, I don't know what he said, but what was behind it was, this doesn't make sense to me. I need to know more.
Okay.
And so, yeah, and we told them together. So they were 9 when we explained that.
Right.
But it's just so hard because you read so much and it's not enough for a 9-year-old. They do want more details, and it's a really hard conversation, a hard decision.
Yeah.
We've always as parents said that we would never not tell our children things they ask. But trying to find the way to do that is safe is just, it feels impossible, actually.
It does feel impossible because we don't want to hear it, do we? So we don't want to tell them it.
Yeah.
So the fact we don't even want to hear it, then we've got to relay that on to them. But I've worked with the same ethos with my children. If they ask a question, and that means they're kind of ready, usually, or somebody's told them at school something they want to know more of. I'd rather they heard it from me, from them, if they want to explore a bit more. So if they're asking a question, I tend to honour that with an answer. And telling my children about my brother, gosh, completely different. You know, again, everyone's story is so different and everyone handles it so differently at the time.
Yeah.
I can't even remember how old my children were. It's your story, not mine, but I handled it differently through my shock. My shock was just tell them straight away. I couldn't hold it back for me. They were a bit older, but I don't know if that was the right thing to do or not.
Yeah.
Yeah. So interesting, isn't it? How we all just, in those moments of shock as well, when our body just gives up, that I don't think I could have hid anything from them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, and to a degree, although, you know, I'm talking today much better, that question is there still. Did I do it right? Should I have done it differently? Would it have been different if I'd have done it differently? I just think I've got more compassion for myself now than I've ever had. And I did the best I could. And I can't change it. So we are where we are with that.
Yeah.
And I still don't know.
No, and especially with our children being our children. Like you say, Isaac was different than your other son by the sounds of it. So I don't know, what's your other son's name?
Ethan.
So they're different in terms of how they processed it as well. Isaac wanted to know a bit more.
Yeah, Isaac's more of a talker, and Isaac's always had a personality that, I suppose this is fair to say, he was just more anxious. He would have bad dreams, not want to be left in the bedroom on his own, would, you know, if he'd watch Fireman Sam, would dream of the house having, you know, that was his personality, really.
Exactly, yeah. So you can't know, how can you? That's why I'm saying, if you're their mum, you know them better than anybody and know how to handle it better than anybody, or dad or carer. So tell us more about how that went after that then. So you went really resilient, really like get on with it.
Yeah.
Kind of help be the mum, be the caring professional I am, went back to work, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I was in work. It was a Friday. I didn't work Monday because I was part-time, and I was in work on the Tuesday.
Oh.
I spoke to a good friend and a colleague and said, please tell everyone. Please tell them they can say, we've heard about your loss, we're sorry, but I don't want to talk about it. I'm coming to work to do my job. And, you know, on the surface of it, it worked really well. I think everyone would have said, oh, Andrea's amazing. But yeah, it was just the shell that looked fine with utter turmoil inside, really.
Gosh, yeah.
And I continued like that, although I was getting more stressed at work. And when people who cared noticed, I just said, I'm just tired, I'm not sleeping. If I sleep, I'll be okay. I think, which was probably a lie I was telling myself. And then I was asked to give evidence at Chris's inquest. It was about 9 months later. And that kind of broke me, really. So from that point, I had about 2 months off work and had some talking sessions, mostly sort of CBT based, I think.
Okay. So 2 months off, some therapy, some CBT.
Yeah.
And the inquest, because you had to give evidence, you had to say what you found to some degree, give evidence to the events of that day.
So I think, yeah, what I found the hardest was hearing that Chris's mental health care had been really severely lacking.
Oh, I see. Right.
And I think I didn't know it at the time, but underneath it all was this was your fault because you didn't understand the process. You didn't see his sudden improvement as a sign that he had a plan. And I think I just thought everybody has let him down.
Right.
His services and me.
So when you say fault, your fault, you felt it was your fault, you didn't notice the fact or the...
I think I felt like I could have saved him, but I didn't.
Yeah, so hard. Yeah, if you made... Well, let's carry on, because I know that in the past sort of couple of years, you've tried to make a bit more sense of that, and you may be in a different place now, but right then, that's how it felt.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Shows what we go through, isn't it? Shows the anguish that brings, just the whole responsibility that you took.
Yeah, and I think that, I don't know if I can explain this right, and it probably makes more sense to you as a psychologist and treatments available. I think the CBT allowed me to process and look at what had happened and say, cognitively, I could not have done anything. It wouldn't have been any different. Or I could have done it and it might have been different on that occasion, but 2 weeks later it wouldn't. And it all made sense. And although I knew it, I don't think I ever felt it or believed it.
So true.
So I kind of thought it was like I know this is true, but it doesn't feel like truth. So if someone asked me, do you feel responsible? I probably would have said no, because I didn't think I was responsible, but actually I did still feel responsible.
So true. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so true. So true that so many people rationally can say, oh, well, I could have done this, I could have done that, but I didn't, I couldn't have done any more than I could. Then that's what CBT does, doesn't it? It kind of helps you with the cognitive side of things mainly. There are some, that's not a blanket kind of view of mine of CBT therapists. I integrate CBT with other things, and some CBT practitioners do work on a very different level. So it's not to say CBT only does that, and so some therapists will integrate it with other things. But I know now that when you just do it on a rational level and your body doesn't process it, you get left in that cognitive state. You can tell everybody, and then almost your body is arguing with your brain.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like you have an internal argument all the time.
Yeah.
Because that shame, guilt, you feel it somewhere.
Yeah.
You can't ignore that. And for everyone, you'll feel it differently in your body. But if you tune into that shame, guilt, when it's there, it's a horrible feeling. And hence EMDR can be helpful, because you kind of merge the two. Then you merge the cognitive thoughts with the EMDR that works on your body. And I know you've had EMDR, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, so in a sense, it's like the story hit a plateau really at that point, that I was functional and I was back in work, and no one would have particularly been aware, and I couldn't have articulated what was wrong, but I just didn't feel like me. Something had changed in me, and I just felt there was no lightheartedness anywhere. Everything was serious, that it wasn't, and this is only after therapy, but it just didn't feel safe to relax anywhere. It was feeling like always primed, which is a pretty exhausting way to live. So what happened was work got particularly stressful, particularly through the pandemic. And there is a particular story. I went to a training session at work which talked about inquests, and it really seemed to, alongside the pandemic and everything, it just triggered me into a state of really severe anxiety, I would describe it as, around work. And so I got a referral to the work wellbeing service, which, I have to say I'm really grateful for. And it was actually in talking and having an assessment that the psychologist there said she felt that I actually had complex PTSD and suggested EMDR.
Yeah.
And so, it's been that process over the last, I'm trying to think when the EMDR started. It's about 8-10 months that I've kind of had EMDR and seem to process, unpick, deal with some of the trauma of the loss of Chris.
Yeah. How did EMDR go for you? What was it like?
So at first it felt really strange. I'm like, I'm not entirely sure this can possibly work. Is it really scientific? Is this a joke? Has someone not made this, and I can't do this. I can't follow this. Like, just all of that around it in the build up and the introduction to it. Because I'm quite scientific, and my mind's going, is this just nonsense? But I just knew that I wanted to be well. I wanted to be who I was before we lost Chris. And so I would have tried anything, really. Once we actually started EMDR, I have to say the first 2 or 3 sessions were horrific. I mean, it told me straight away that this was real, because I was completely not expecting the physical and emotional reaction. So, it felt like it undid my brain. It felt like, I couldn't process or think, and my sleeping went to pot. But I suppose that's the determination in me. I'm a bit of a stubborn.
Just keep going back. Yeah.
If this is a chance of working, then I'm going to keep going. And
well done, because it's so easy at that point to go, it's to feel overwhelmed at that point. Yeah.
And overwhelmed is definitely the word. Yeah. I mean, I know. So shall I say a little bit about EMDR?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So before we begin the sessions, I was taught some different strategies and techniques, and one of them was to find myself in a safe space, which worked really well for me. I found my own safe space and could visualize it.
Nice.
And then the psychologist wanted me to come up with I can't remember how she described it now, but it was like an imaginary safe person, and I just couldn't do it. So I don't know, it felt weird. So what I ended up with was my dog.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
So my dog Rafi became my safe person, and somehow managed to reflect back to me some self-compassion that I would have easily had for anybody else in that situation, but I just didn't have for myself. So yeah, Rafi became my compassionate friend. But after an EMDR session, I remember one session I was so undone that we were trying to do, is it called like a sensory journey, where you find 5 things that you can see, smell, hear, touch. And I was so distraught because I couldn't count. I couldn't hold in my mind 2 things and remember I was at number 2.
Yeah.
Or what third was. And I'm so, I'm a pretty intelligent, bright individual, and I can't count. And it was frightening, really. But I can't tell you how it worked, but it worked and it changed.
Okay, so that only lasted a couple of sessions, 2 weeks maybe, and then let's get on to the better part.
Yeah, bad. I wouldn't want to put anybody off trying EMDR because it absolutely has been amazing for me.
Yes.
The sessions just got easier. I think because there was a lot, and it wasn't just the memory of Chris that we were working on, but the reaction within me just got calmer and calmer until it genuinely stopped being scary, this is happening again, to, yeah, that happened, it was awful, but it's past.
Oh, so good. So nice. So pleased for you. You could do that with the, because EMDR, that is what you want to, that's exactly what the goal is.
Yeah.
Yes, it still happened to me, but I'm not there physically anymore. It's now 8 years down the line. I'm safe right now, but that memory is, something I went through. So EMDR doesn't take away the memory. It doesn't say it didn't happen at all, does it? It just makes your body stop feeling like you're back there.
Yeah, and I think that was what I couldn't understand previously or explain, because, there are still times when I can get really distressed because it is a really distressing memory, but it's just on a different level altogether.
Yeah. And it's hard to describe that, isn't it? It's almost hard to describe how it feels different because you can't imagine at the beginning how that would happen, and you can't even describe it. People describe it a bit like looking at it from a distance. The memory is there, but you're looking at it through a glass window, or, you're not actually in it anymore.
Yeah.
The memory is a memory. It's where it should be. It's like other memories are. Other memories are filed somewhere neatly that happened to me, but I'm not in it now. And that's what EMDR, it puts that into a little file, if you like. Part of your brain that says, I'm not in that right now. It's not happening to me right now. Because it sounds as if you spent 7 years. And when you describe that, being on alert, being primed and ready, that was your fight or flight system.
Yeah.
Still being in that place. And EMDR neatly took it out of that fight or flight system place in your brain.
Yeah.
Neatly put it into another place. And research is showing it takes time with EMDR, and it does. And even research now is showing that if you say you have a course of 6 weeks of CBT and then you stop, your anxiety and things might drop a little bit and it might stay where it is for the next year. But with EMDR, it might drop a little bit during the session. Say you had 6 as well, it would drop the same amount or even more with EMDR. But over time, over the next year, they keep seeing a drop. So your nervous system keeps working on it even when your sessions stop with EMDR. So it like kickstarts your nervous system, EMDR. And that's why you got that kickstart of those 2 sessions of, you kickstarted it. It brought on what you needed to be brought on. Yeah. But once you kickstart the train, it keeps going, and it'll keep going when sessions stop, but not as intensely, nowhere near as intensely, because it's gradually going down a hill. It's gradually going down a hill, the intensity of it. So you'll probably, even if EMDR stops, your body will still be saying, okay, I'm still processing this a little bit every now and again.
Like, I think it's like the tools that EMDR have given me. I think the biggest thing it's given me is to actually understand myself.
Nice.
So if I get a reaction, I'm like, okay, that's what that is. Now you've got a choice. And the best choice is for you to, if it is in work, upset about something, is just to not have to tell everybody, but just say, oh, I just need to go and get this and go and get that, but take myself, via a storeroom if it has to be, and, sit down and just spend a little while doing some safe space work. That's normally what I would go to because that seemed to work for me. So I guess it's sort of continuing to give myself therapy in a way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. These tools that you've given. Anyone can learn themselves the safe, find a safe image in your head and go there with all your senses. And it's easier to do it in a therapeutic relationship where someone can talk you through it.
Yeah.
It's accessible from anywhere, isn't it? If you can take a breath somewhere and be quiet, go to the toilet if you need to, sit on the toilet.
So I'm sure people must have thought there was something up with my stomach the amount of times I spent.
Oh, and you gave yourself space and time to do that, though, because you hadn't for 7 years of holding it together. It's a long time.
Yeah.
Holding it together to then say enough. And then the pandemic helped, in inverted columns, with that. Yeah. Made you say, actually, I need to, I can't keep.
I think it just pushed me, to be fair, over the edge where I couldn't hide it any longer.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so EMDR finished? You finished with EMDR?
Yes, I am, yeah.
And where are you now? So what's happened since then? Are you sound, much more grounded? You don't sound like you're living on the edge.
Yeah, I'm so much better. So again, I needed time off work when the EMDR. So when I had the initial reaction to the EMDR, I had to go off sick, which was awful for me because, it's just not what I do. I don't take sick leave. So, I told my boss I'd have a week, which became 2 weeks, which became a month, which became 3 months, as I accepted quite how unwell I'd got, really. But I did go back to work. It just was incredibly stressful because it was still mid-pandemic. And I came really to a pretty grounded decision that staying in such a stressful environment wouldn't help me stay well, and that actually I could make some choices and relieve one source of stress. So, yeah, I mean, it was a difficult decision to make because I've been a physio now for 30 years, and who knows, at some point I might do some more physio, but I just decided that the NHS environment was not a good place for me to continue to get mentally healthy. So I decided to leave. So yeah, I've had a month now of working on new plans to try a new direction.
And that's to do with art, isn't it? It's to do with...
Yeah. So, and it's really all come out of this whole experience. When I chose my dog Rafi as my compassionate voice, it happened to be at a time where I was involved with an online charity group called Parenting Mental Health, which has been a brilliant help to me in supporting my son with his mental health difficulties. And they offered a free Creative Connections workshop. And in that workshop, I illustrated Rafi sharing his compassionate voice with me. And I shared it in the group and it just spoke to a lot of people. So that's what I found myself doing over the next number of months, is sort of illustrating my journey of finding self-compassion through Rafi. And yeah, it just came to me that actually the illustrations that I was doing were bringing people just a feeling of, oh, not me, not just me. Other people feel like this. And people were asking if they could have the images. So what I've decided to do is, I've created an Etsy shop selling the images. And for me, it's bigger than just making art, though. I want to connect with people and people to feel comfortable and free to talk. And I found that actually it distracted me and it just allowed me to relax. I just think actually if that could be accessible for anybody, whatever, for everybody, life's stressful at the moment, isn't it? And I thought, well, actually, why don't you do some online sessions and people can just join you and get out their paints, whether they've ever painted or not, and have a bit of a play, really. I guess it's grown-up play.
Yeah, and an art therapist would say, actually, you're not distracting yourself. You're working with the unconscious mind a little bit there.
Oh, right, okay.
To just, in a really relaxed environment, you're not doing it in the same way as EMDR. You're kind of just sitting and painting and drawing, and you're unconscious.
Yeah.
It's a bit like a dreaming place to be. It's a bit like where your dream place is, where you can just explore in a really gentle way your unconscious mind.
So
you're delivering online classes.
Yeah, well, I actually just hit interesting timing. I did my first one last night.
Oh, how did it go?
We had a lovely time. So yeah, just really nice.
So there's no reason to go. Anyone can go and just rock up and do some drawing with you online, painting.
Yeah, so I'm theming the sessions around one of the illustrations that I've done just to give us a starting point. And I've created some outlines. So if anybody's really
Struggling.
unsure of, they can download the outlines. And then it's just a few hints and tips on using watercolours and,
Nice.
and adapting the picture to kind of maybe be about them and their family. So, not everybody's got a little white dog, so they might want to paint what dog they've got or somebody else. So.
And it's about doing that while you're connecting with other people, about community.
Yeah, so definitely. I mean, I may make just tutorials available that are just really about the painting, but I guess my underneath passion is that friendship actually. So Rafi, my dog, his name's Rafiki, and Rafiki is Swahili for friend. So it just, I think he became my compassionate friend. And what I'd love to see is people just being a friend to themselves. I think a lot of us, well, particularly who've lost a loved one to suicide, aren't very kind to ourselves. So what I'm hoping to do isn't about suicide loss. It's just about helping people who put themselves under pressure to be perfect.
We all need a compassionate friend internally, all of us. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's the thing. I've learned, or am still learning, how to be compassionate with myself. And that's brought me the biggest change, I think.
So it's such an important message for anyone. I'm so pleased you're developing that voice within you. There's an exercise in CBT called Develop Your Compassionate Friend. It's a similar one to EMDR, where you kind of mindfully imagine a person coming over the horizon who's going to have that lovely warm voice that says, you're okay, you're doing all right, keep going, that compassionate, you did all you could, you did the best you could, that kind of lovely voice. So it works through a lot of therapy, and in ACT that I do a lot of, it's how can we develop that voice within you that gives yourself compassion when you need it, because we all deserve it.
Yeah.
And we're not always going to get it externally. So where best to get it? Internally.
Yeah.
Or with the dog.
Yeah.
Hence my dogs. Yeah. So I'm really aware, Isaac, it's a really important conversation to have around you going to that group where you needed to, that you mentioned. Sorry, I've forgotten what you said it was called.
Parenting mental health.
But I think that's the subject in itself.
Yeah.
So I want to give that as much time as we've given just this journey today. So how do you feel about coming back and sharing your journey as a mum with Isaac, who has also struggled with mental health? Because I think that's a really important topic in itself, how us mothers manage, care for, look after, be compassionate towards ourselves whilst we are managing teenagers with struggles with their mental health.
Yeah, I'm absolutely happy to do that. Yeah.
So I really want to give it what it's due, because it sounds like that's part of the complex grief, isn't it?
Yes.
That you've had things to go through there as well. And I want to give that as much time as we can. So we'll do another episode on that. Another episode will come up soon, hopefully, if Andrea's happy to talk to me again soon.
Yeah, no problem.
On being a mum to somebody with mental health difficulties. I really want to pull out something as well. You said in the very beginning that Chris had bipolar disease. When you say that word, I've got a feeling you've thought a lot about that kind of word. What's your belief behind saying bipolar disease? Because a lot of times it's bipolar disorder, bipolar diagnosis. I'm just really interested.
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I actually do know it's disorder, but I don't know. I think so. This is going to be a long answer. Is that okay?
Yeah, go for it.
In trying to understand what happened with Chris.
Yeah, so important. Yeah.
I have really come to the conclusion that he couldn't have done anything different.
Yeah.
And that in that sense, it wasn't an active choice. So you wouldn't condemn somebody for going into a diabetic coma, although you may say they could have followed their regime better. It wouldn't in the same way be as critical or as harsh with that person as with somebody who's taken their own life.
Yeah.
So I guess it's been that struggle. And also I've struggled with people saying that suicide isn't selfish, because Chris wasn't selfish, but his final act was very selfish. He fixed his own pain by causing us a huge amount of pain. And I love him. I'm not mad at him, but ultimately it was really selfish. But if he'd have been well and hadn't had bipolar disease, there is no way he would have done that.
Yeah.
So I don't even know if that thought process makes sense, but that's kind of what I've been on in trying to figure it out.
Yeah, and so much guilt can come from that. So much guilt can come from the taking responsibility for it. And it's so hard for us to say, but they did this, and it hurts that they did this, and they've left us with the pain. And that's such a conflicting feeling to have in suicide loss, I think. So it's taken you time, by the sounds of it, to really think about where your positioning on that is now with you and Chris, which is personal to you and Chris, and how you have come to that, by the sounds of it.
Yeah, I think because I tried to listen and understand the process people say you go through, and initially I had no anger whatsoever. I couldn't feel angry in the process. And then kind of went through a phase, I think, when I started the EMDR, where I just was overtaken by intense anger. But I told you, I trusted you with a relationship with my sons. And then a bit more anger at myself because I took that risk. They were only 7. They didn't choose that risk. I chose that risk for them. So it's just so complicated.
Yeah.
But I think for me, I had to feel that anger to process it. And the denial by saying it wasn't selfish, it wasn't hurtful. For me, I'm not saying this is for anybody else, but for me to say, to go immediately to, I love him, I've forgiven him, he was ill, it wasn't him, didn't work. It didn't feel like a truth. I had to go to a point of, you did this to us and it's unthinkable.
Yeah. So you went there, but also went to the next stage of, I don't hate you for it, I forgive you for it.
Yeah, and you did your best.
Yeah.
You were trying to get better. Your intention and your motivation wasn't to cause us pain. The level of your pain in that moment prevented you from seeing the consequence. I believe that, because there was nothing mean or uncaring in Chris at all. Yeah.
Like you say, you couldn't have done anything else at the time, like the diabetic person who, we don't blame them for the steps they took before to manage their diabetes.
Yeah.
They said that they died of diabetes. It's a similar thing, isn't it? That you're just trying to give the same grace to Chris, really.
Yeah.
What he could with his mental health.
Yeah.
But he couldn't live with it anymore. Words are so important, and they can be so activating in suicide grief.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the selfish word can be really activating. And I think it's activating. I've thought a lot about this because we want to protect them. I want to protect my brother's name. I get quite fiery about it. I just want anyone to think bad of him.
Yeah.
So the word selfish to me feels like for me, exactly, so different to everybody, feels like a harsh word that I wouldn't use for him. But I can see how you needed to go to that place in order to move past it, in order to actually forgive him.
Yeah.
But words are so heavy and important and activating. And again, we all have to use the words that we used to use, I think, to find the story we can live with.
Yeah.
And that's the story that you've got to after all of this time. We all have to sort of say to ourselves, I'm allowed to have the story that I have.
Yeah.
With the words that help me with the story that I have. And all too often it takes years, I think, and time, not always years, but just time and processing and therapy and all the things that we go through, and being around other people who understand, to find the story we can live with, to say, this is my story, because we don't actually know the full story. We can keep going over their last moments, going over the days before. We'll probably never know exactly what happened in those last 24 hours. Some people do know more than others, but it's such the unknown with suicide and the picking apart of why did they have to make that decision that day. Again, decision, not an easy word to use. Was it just a decision? Was it his choice? No, not in the moment of the mental pain he was in. It's not a rational choice to make, is it?
No.
It's not like having a cup of tea or coffee. It's not a choice, No. He wasn't deciding whether to have tea or coffee. He was deciding whether he wanted to be here anymore or not. And those stories that we can live with are really personal to us. And I think it's really helpful to hear how you've done that. So thank you for sharing it, because a lot of people can't say particular words because of the shame that comes from that. If I say that word, will I upset somebody else? Can I say that word? But while we don't say the words for the fear of upsetting people, it keeps suicide and our processing in that shameful place of silence.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing it, because I think that many people out there, many might be feeling the same thing, but they can't voice it. So to hear you saying it, I think, and how you've used it with forgiveness for Chris, it's not in a judgmental way, is it? And it's in you were in that moment, but the illness, your bipolar made you feel like that in the moment. It wasn't you. You were a lovely person, Chris.
Yeah.
And I forgive you and everything from that. So thank you. Oh, I'm really a big sigh because I'm really aware it's such a big topic, and I really feel for you of holding it together for 7 years, spending the last year really processing it. Thank goodness for your therapist, for the psychologist in India, that you're able to speak today. And you've come to the place where you're doing something in your life now with your profession that you feel like you'll get more meaning from, maybe.
Yes.
With less stress.
Yeah.
And I'd love to talk again about Isaac, because I think there's another story in itself there. And is there anything else you want to leave people with today before we finish?
Just wherever you're at, be kind to yourself.
Yeah. Compassion.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Treat yourself like you would a friend you really cared about.
Treat yourself as if you were a friend you really cared about. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us here today. I hope it's served you and given you something for your journey with suicide. Come back and subscribe, like, do whatever you need to do on your platform to help us to raise awareness of suicide, because the more we keep saying the word, the more we can gain support for us left behind, and the more we can raise awareness of the word and how society sees it and reduce this stigma that's so attached to it. Please get in touch. You can find me on my website, suicidegriefsupport.com. I really want to hear from you. But for now, please take care of yourselves and take care of each other. And remember, we are stronger together.